You made it. Your child's 6 now. Oh, but in comes all the questions and friends at school and sleepovers. And does the talking ever stop?
Oh, let's get into that. Hey everybody, welcome to Family Friday. I'm Nathan Warnock.
I'm Andrea.
This is a show we get to do every Friday where we look at God's design for family, parenting, what we can do as parents to better raise up our family according to that design.
Yep. Our topic this month is about the stages of parenting. So last week we talked about the first stage, the 0 to 5. And then this week we're talking about the 6 to 12 range. And then in the future weeks we'll be talking about 13 to 18 and then adult children.
That's
and
right.
we'll have some guests along with us since we've never been through those stages.
That's great.
So today is stage 2, 6 to 12. And we're going to talk about, so we've got one child who's in that stage. So we'll probably talk a lot about Jackson and just some challenges, some things that we think of as far as this stage, thinking long term, and then what to really cherish.
That's right.
So what would you say is kind of your overall thought of this stage of parenting?
This is one of my favorites.
This is like the sweet spot of parenting. This is after the real grunt work of that 0 to 5 range.
Yep.
And it's before those sassy teenage years come in.
Right.
And I feel like it's really the sweet spot.
Right. So I have a bit of an advantage in talking about some of these because if you heard last week or this week that my voice sounds horrible, and I apologize if it does, but baseball season has started.
Do you need some water?
And I have some, thank you. And I have the privilege now of coaching Jackson's select baseball team. But this is my 16th year of coaching youth baseball.
You're so old.
I'm very old. Back when I first started coaching, the bases, they just put pigs around the field and you had to go touch them after you hit the ball. But, so I've coached for 16 years. Obviously, Jackson is not 16 years old. He's 10. So I started coaching when I was 4, 16 years ago. So I've coached kids from 8 years old all the way up to 18 years old. Coached high school for a little bit. So while it is not the same as parenting, it does give you a pretty good insight into the different age groups. And I really agree with what you said about this being the sweet spot. I mean, it is definitely that place where your kids still think you're cool, but they're not completely dependent upon you. Right, to be their entertainment, to be their everything. And so, for me, when I think of this, it's of the 6 to 12 range, it's an exciting time for me because I get to see my kids grow, I get to see them develop, I get to really start getting a concrete glimpse into who this child is going to be as an adult. And sometimes that's terrifying, right? Because sometimes you look at that and go, this child's going to be a train wreck when they become an adult. But, that's part of it too. I'm sure there are times Jackson looks at me and says that guy is a train wreck as an adult. So those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that, I feel like this is really the sweet spot of parenting. But also, it's super fun to see Jackson and other kids this age really come into their own, really start having opinions about big deal things. Yep. Really be able to think about those opinions. Sometimes they're not our opinions.
Right.
And usually in that 0 to 5, their quote opinions are just what mom and dad think. But this 6 to 12 range, they're starting to think on their own and why they think certain things. And I really love seeing that. I really love experiencing that with him and being able to have conversation with him that's intelligent conversation.
Sure.
And seeing him really just come into his own and develop as a person.
Yeah, totally.
I like that about this age.
It's great.
Yeah, and then Okay, so that's kind of the overarching thing. So let's talk about some challenges that this range brings on. Some challenges as well as maybe solutions and some how the Bible can help guide us as parents.
You bet. So I'm gonna just spitball out a few of them. This is not going to be a 6-hour video, so we're not going to be able to cover all of them. But right off the top of my head, technology starts to become a huge issue in today's society. There are a ton of 6 to 12-year-olds that essentially have become internet and or video game and or electronic media addicted. And it is costing them dearly.
Yeah, it really is.
Long
term, like costing them long term.
Right. So technology is a big one. Depression. I think that's a big thing to address at this age, is how do we protect our kids from that? And I share that because there's tons of statistics that the rate of depression. Now, there's a ton of teen suicide right now, which obviously we're not talking about the teenage years yet. But that they don't wake up one day as a 15-year-old and have those issues. Those are things that develop over time. How do we begin protecting our kids for that? Sex. I mean, while this is not a stage certainly where you would want to have to be worrying about your child becoming sexually active, the whole society all around us is dead set on exposing young people in this 6 to 12-year-old range to what the world wants to define sex as. And so, as for Christian parents, how do we respond to that? So I would say that's a big one. Discipline and consistency and diligence. That's a big one too in this age. So those are kind of the 4 that I thought about as I thought about this kind of 6 to 12 range. So now that you've heard those, any you want to add, or an order you want to try and tackle those in?
Sure. Something that I would add is, the diligence. I totally agree with you on the emotional side of things. This is an age where they're trying to sort out emotions and just kind of how to deal with that.
Right.
How to deal with really what can be an emotional load for them at times, but also feeling like them recognizing that this is, something that they don't want to just, crying in front of friends is not socially acceptable, and so they're trying to keep it in, but they have this emotional load. And anyway,
what about kissing mom in front of my friends?
Yeah.
Right, or dad. I mean, these are all things that they're dealing
peer
with.
Pressure stuff.
Yeah, so let's dive into those, and I'll tell you what. I'll let you think for just a second on what order you want to take, or what you want to start with. In the meantime, I just wanted to say, you may be watching this and going, "Hey, I watched last week's episode. My son's 8, and we never really did the structure thing. So now what?" And I would say, we talked a lot about that 0 to 5 range is big for discipline and structure, but if you didn't do that at that 0 to 5 range, start right now, right? Yes, it might be harder than if you had started that at 3, but it isn't going to be as hard as it will be if you try to start that with your child when they're 14, right? I mean, start now saying, "Hey, I didn't do..." For one thing, it's a powerful thing to be able to humble ourselves to our kids and say, "Hey, I didn't do this right," as your parent or as your parents. But starting now, we want to do things in a way that honors the design and structure of the family as God designed it to be.
Right.
So we're going to put some structure in place. It's going to be hard. Mom and dad are going to make some sacrifices too, but this is what we're going to do as a family, and really set that stake in the sand now. And if that means you get to some of these other things a little bit later on because you're really focused on that for now, then fantastic.
Yep. So let's start with diligence / independence.
Sure.
Let's start with that. So this age is an age where they can have a decent amount of responsibility, especially as they're getting up towards later in this stage. And there's a difference between having responsibility and doing it well.
Yeah, that's right.
So we find that diligence is a word that I think we're saying every day, multiple times a day.
Yes.
And it's important not only because I want things done well, but because we're also trying to, this kind of goes into what we'll talk about a little bit later, but think long term.
Yeah.
I don't want our children to think I can just do a job and as long as it gets done in some sort of semblance, it's good enough. Good enough is not good enough. I want our kids to be diligent and work as unto the Lord and do the job completely. We talk about integrity a lot and being people of integrity, and that really goes down. Being diligent, choosing diligence is really a matter of integrity.
Yeah, and I find that parents, and now hear me when I say parents, what I'm really saying is Nathan, can generally fall into one of two traps in this. You can catch your child not operating with diligence, and you can go to this extreme of, my child's a lazy bum that's going to be living in a van down by the river for the rest of his life.
That's not a you problem, that's a me problem too.
So that's on the one extreme. On the other extreme, we can get to where we're like, every 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old is lazy like this. It's just a phase. I don't need to get on him about it. He'll grow out of it, or she'll grow out of it, right? And so we can fall on either of those two extremes, and I think those are both wrong. I think we need to begin, as you said, teaching our children what diligence and integrity looks like, and really those are separate things, right? I mean, diligence is, here's the task that you have. Do you do it to the best of your ability? And as those of us that come from a Christian standpoint, we know what that really means is not just the best of your ability, but as unto the Lord. Mm-hmm. That's diligence. Integrity is really, are you operating with diligence when no one's looking? Right? When you do this job where your mom and I aren't over your shoulder pointing out how you're doing or not doing it with diligence, do you continue to do it with diligence? And I feel like the diligence piece starts at 6, 7, earlier in this stage, and then it grows, kind of balloons into the integrity piece. You got to teach the diligence first,
right?
And then we start to have the expectation that, okay, not only do I expect you to do this with diligence, but I expect you to do it with integrity, meaning when I ask you to do these things, I expect them to be done with diligence, even if I'm not checking up on you.
Yep. Right. And that kind of leads to some independence too. So really important for us to teach our kids a lot of independence.
Critical. And,
it starts with the diligence and then the integrity piece and then the independence. We homeschool our children and when they hit, that as they grow older in their schooling, they have more and more responsibility to be independent because I want to teach them to not always have to rely on me and to know how to work hard on their own.
Yeah, a big piece of that independence is helping our children to be consequence-minded, meaning thinking about the consequences of the decisions that I'm making before I make them. And this is, the beginnings of really where a lot of adults go wrong, frankly. But for our children to be able to teach them that, hey, I need to be thinking about, if I blow off my schoolwork right now, then what's that going to look like later when I want to do something I want to do? Right? Helping our kids to be consequence driven so that when they're older and the consequences are, hey, if I go out drinking with my friends, what's the consequence of that going to be? Right? We need to train them to be able to have that sort of thought process.
Yep. Yeah. What was some of the other stuff? Technology is something that's a challenge.
Yeah. Look, guys, and we talked probably more than maybe we should have in our first week video about technology, but this is the age where it becomes hugely critical. It is mind-bending to me the number of 7, 8, 9-year-olds that have cell phones with internet access and all that other stuff. And I think, and I hear a lot of parents that say, well, look, I've taught them about the dangers of that. And I'm not questioning that that's the case. What I'm telling you is there is an entire black market industry of people that have specifically designed what they do. Their entire thought process is, how do I target young people and get them to do what I want them to do, even with parents that have taught them that people like me exist.
Right.
And guys, it is insidious. I have a very close family member that works in the Department of Justice, and this is what he does, is looks into these types of things. And when you hear and see the stories that come out of how people get wrapped up into this and victimize our children, you cannot prepare your children for that. You can't.
No.
Because your children don't have a mentality to be able to think about it like that. Then praise the Lord for that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't want a 9-year-old that knows graphically that there are people out there that want to take advantage of them. Right? I don't want that. But by definition, then, we have to be gatekeepers for that. And it's really hard to do that if you're letting your child have unsupervised time sitting in front of these devices.
Right. Yep.
Right? And beside that whole part of it, because you may go, look, you are off the rails with regards to the predator stuff. And that's fine. Beyond that, most adults can't handle looking at Facebook as much as they are looking at Facebook these days, right? Or any kind of TikTok or any of the other ones, right? I mean, these things are things that other people use to show the best parts of their life, right? So it's really easy to look at Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or any of the rest of these and go, man, how come that guy's life's so much better than me? How come my buddy down the street gets to take this sweet vacation? My mom and dad just throw me in a camper and we go to the state park for the weekend, right? And in your mind, you're thinking, well, this is amazing. We're getting away as a family. And you know what? It is amazing that you're getting away as a family. But that whole keeping up with the Joneses comparison mentality creates in our children an anxiety that I'm not wearing the right stuff, I'm not in with the right people, I'm not doing the right things or taking the right vacations, and it creates anxiety that very easily turns into depression when they hit that next age and results in an entire generation of high teen suicide, high teen depression, all of those kinds of really devastating statistics that we read about all the time.
And besides just the comparison or the people who are trying to, be predators, there's evidence, lots of it, that technology changes children's brains. So Nathan will post a link to.
It should already be up.
Okay.
At this point.
To a doctor that gives some really great information about kids and technology.
Yep. Yeah. So before you may be listening to us and going, y'all are nuts, and that's fine. Listen to her, right? She's a doctor. I just played one on TV. But let's listen to what she has to say. And this is what I always say. It's the same as when we do like our top 5 books every man must read, right? If you disagree with me about something, read the book and then tell me about it, right? If you disagree with us, listen to what she has to say, right? And then tell me what you disagree with. Totally.
So yeah, we limit technology quite a bit. The average age that a child sees pornography is 9 years old, and that changes them.
Yeah, and almost never intentionally.
Yes.
That's the thing about this, is I think when we think of that, we think, my child's not going to be searching for pornography.
No, they're probably not.
That's right. More often than not, you stumble around with it, right? Like,
you can't ever unsee it.
Right. You're searching boom on the internet, and your buddy types in boob on the internet, right? I mean, that's a stupid example, but that's exactly how we hear stories of young people that were exposed to those things at a young age. It was completely an innocent thing, but once that genie's out of the bottle, it's out of the bottle.
Right.
So we need to protect our kids in that. So that leads to something you raised in the opening, and this is probably going to really put people on thinking we're the crazy parents, but you talked about sleepovers.
You guys, we don't do them. We don't allow our children to sleep over at other people's houses except their grandparents. We know what they were like as parents, and we trust them implicitly, so we let them sleep over at their grandparents. Other than that, there are no sleepovers because
at other people's houses.
Right.
The sleepovers are here.
At other people's houses, we allow them here, and there's lots of rules. You know, they don't sleep in the same bed and that sort of thing. But there's so much that can go awry at sleepovers that kids don't even they're not you know, ill-meaning children, whatever. But it just gives opportunity for things to go in a way that they shouldn't. And I think both of us had that happen to us quite a few times when we were growing up at sleepovers. And we've just made a rule that we're just not going to do that.
Right, and no condemnation if you don't feel that way yourselves. We're just we wanted to share transparently with you guys about kind of how we raise our kids. And I'll be honest, in the 6 to 12 and really the 0 to 12 ranges, we really see a big part of our job as parents as the gatekeepers for our kids.
Yep.
Right? I mean, we need to be diligent to try and protect their innocence because the world around us is just dead set
to take it away.
On taking away the innocence of a child.
Yeah.
And it's really insidious.
Right. And so Philippians 4:6 says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known to God." So I don't want to come across as we're scared of everything and we're just fearful of the world. We take this verse so seriously. Be anxious for nothing, and we're not perfect at that, but we know God has called us to a job, and we try to take that the job of raising our children, raising them well, and being gatekeepers, and we try to take that very seriously and do the things that God's calling us to do. The hard things like telling our children, sorry, you can't do a sleepover at your buddy's house. It's hard to say that because we had tons of fun at sleepovers when we were younger, but there was also things that we were really hurt by. So be anxious for nothing. We're continually giving our insecurities over to the Lord and thanking Him for giving these children to us, for His protection of our children, and really trusting Him that we're going to do what you called us to do, but ultimately we trust our children to you. That's and right. We trust you to protect our children. So I don't want you to think, oh, you need to be scared of everything. No way. Right. Because you just need to be diligent yourself, do what God's called you to do, and then give any fears over to the Lord and ask Him to protect your children.
Yeah, that's good. And the other thing on that is being wise about how we present that to our kids. Right? I mean, with Jackson, for one thing, we got to him early.
Yes. Right?
When he was very young, and even Ryan's at the age where we will begin talking to her about this, where we say, hey, this is part of our family DNA, right? Mm-hmm. We're not going to be doing sleepovers at your friend's house. But we'd love to have them over here to have a sleepover. And while that was hard and continues to be hard sometimes when he has to miss out on some of those things, he's gotten to the point where when he has a friend that says something about a sleepover, he will respond with, well, man, let me talk to my mom and dad. Maybe you could have a sleepover at my house. Mm-hmm. It's just become a thing where it just is part of what we do. So it's good. I think that's a good piece of it.
What was another thing that you said that we were talking about with challenges?
The talk.
Ooh.
The talk.
The talk about what?
You know what I mean? Babe?
No.
The
what
talk.
About it?
The talk.
It.
Yes.
The
so
S word?
This is something that there is hugely varied opinion on, and I'm under no delusion that we'll share how we do it and there won't be 50 people that are going, I would never do it that way. What I would say is the conversation about sex with our children must be steeped completely in the leading of the Holy Spirit. And that means long before you sit down to talk about sex with your children, you must be praying about this with the Lord and really knowing your children. I mean, that's a big piece of it, is really getting to know your children at a deep level, being a student of your child. Because you'll know, right, when they start noticing the opposite sex more, when they start wondering about, well, how's this whole baby thing work, right?
When they're mature enough to hear the information.
Exactly right. So again, we only have one child who we've talked about sex with, and with Jackson, we talked to him about sex just within the last 8 months or so, probably.
And we did it together.
We did it together. Like, that's important, right? I know. Sometimes people have this feeling of like, well, my daughter, my wife will do that, or my son, my husband will do that. I would really recommend against that. You want to be unified as a family when you talk about that, and you also don't want your kids to feel like, if you have daughters, dads, I'm sure you don't want your daughters to feel like, man, anything like personally, like with my period or sexually or whatever, my dad doesn't want to know about it. Because I'll bet that's not your heart. Right. And I feel like it kind of sends that message when your wife has that conversation with her and she's going, where's dad? And dad's golfing with his buddies. Right?
Yeah. You don't want your kids to think that there's any sort of embarrassment with that topic.
Right.
With one or both of you.
Right. The other thing is, I believe that sex is not a talk. It is a series of conversations that you have with your children, starting at a time that the Holy Spirit leads, and never ending. Mm-hmm. Ever. Mm-hmm. Right? When your kids are like ever. Right? I mean, that's a conversation that is going to continue. And it starts, for us, it started with Jackson with a conversation about just what is sex, right? I mean, anatomically speaking, what is sex? How does it work? Why do people do that? Why is this something that, what did God create? How did this come about?
And then what the Bible has to say about sex.
Right. Is it, because of course to a 9-year-old, it sounds like,
ew,
that's really yuck. And you know what? Here's the thing, when you're beginning, and here's really the reason why the Holy Spirit, I think, led us to talk about this at 9, that statistic you gave earlier, that the average age that people are exposed to pornography is 9 years old. And really what we wanted to do was to present sex to Jackson as a beautiful gift that the Lord has presented us with, that he will share someday with his wife. However, there is an entire industry in this fallen world that we live in that is dedicated to selling sex for cheap thrills. And I wanted him to have an understanding as he moved from 9.5 to 10, that if he comes across that, it's an incredibly dangerous thing and he must run from that immediately and let us know. And a lot of times when people are exposed to pornography, it's such like a shock to them because they don't even know what really that is, that it turns from shock to curiosity. Mm-hmm. For him, we wanted him to understand this is an absolute danger. It is a perversion of something that God gave us as a beautiful thing between a married man and woman. And I want you to feel comfortable telling me, hey, I saw this. I know it's bad. Can you help me?
Yeah, and it also clued him in as to why we're so careful with technology. Because he, compared to some of his friends, we're super strict with technology.
Yep.
And we've always been sort of, hiding the ball a little bit about why. And so it gave him that full picture of why we're so careful.
Yeah. And here's what I would share about that. I would encourage you to prayerfully consider having that conversation with your children when you're pretty sure they're not having sex conversations with their friends. Before. Right? So err on the side of younger than older. That's what we did with Jackson, and I'll give you kind of an example. When we got to the end of that conversation with him, we've talked about sex and what it is, how it works, why you do it, is it good or bad, what's the Bible say? We went through all that. We get to the end of that, and he kind of just said, he asked a couple questions along the way. We just mainly just sat there. We had ice cream. Right? That was our thing. Is that we were going to sit down, the three of us, have ice cream, and talk about it. So we get to the end, and I said, well, Jackson, do you have any questions or anything you want to ask? Yeah, I do. I said, okay, well, you can ask anything. We'll answer you. Then he goes, why is it that when you have ice cream in a cone and you tip the cone upside down, the ice cream doesn't fall out? And, we answered the question, and Andrea and I chuckled, and I walked away feeling like that was a little confirmation from the Holy Spirit that we did the right thing. Right? Like this was informational for him, So he received the information, and then he was like, okay. And then he moved on, right? As opposed to if he would have been wrestling with what we were telling him versus what he knew from his buddies or what he had been exposed to in some other electronic media or whatever, and he has this internal torture of what to believe. I kind of felt like that was,
that's good.
That was a good thing.
Good.
So,
any other challenges that you kind of shotgunned off that we haven't talked about yet? Should write them down.
Let's see. No, I think we covered them. Yeah, if there's one that I missed, y'all please put it in the comments down below, or shoot me an email, or get on our Facebook page and let us know, and we will address that by video specifically. How's that? If we forgot anything.
Yeah, great.
Excellent.
So then, how do we think long term? How do we prepare them for the next stage in this stage?
For me, it really comes down to beginning to get them to stop thinking about just receiving information and start thinking about applying that information to their lives. Right? I mean, in the 0 to, well, really, what 3 to 10-year-old range, our children are all about receiving information. And interestingly, the Lord has designed their brains in that time to more easily store and remember information than, say, our brains are suited to do. And so during that time, they're receiving all kinds of information. Now, that puts a lot on our shoulders too, because they're not just receiving the information we tell them, right? They're receiving what they see and experience. So if I'm telling Jackson to work with diligence, but I'm showing laziness in my own life, that's going to speak much louder to him than what I'm telling him about diligence. Right. But they're these sponges for information. Well, we need, as they get older, as they get closer to the back half of this second stage of parenting, we need to start transitioning them to, how do you think about that? Right? How do you defend the things that you know in the face of people that disagree with you? Or how do you begin to take all of these things that you've learned and apply those to the world around you? It's the beginnings of that real deep critical thinking stage of childhood, and spending time intentionally as a couple challenging our children in higher level conversation, and having some back and forth to challenge some of the things that they think. I think that's really important on the back half of this stage as we begin to prepare our children for those teenage years, where they're going to have to convince themselves of a lot of things in those coming of age years, where the things you've told them the previous 13 plus years, they begin to question all of that as they mature from a child into an adult.
One of the things that we're also trying to prepare in this stage is, to borrow a phrase from one of my friends, is to be a good American. And what I mean by that is, thinking of others, really not always thinking of themselves, and doing for others and empathizing with others, respecting others, respecting authority, respecting our country, and
understanding our history
and all that sort of thing. So really trying to prepare them to be a good citizen, be a good American. To preparing them to be a good friend. Teaching them that conversation shouldn't always be about you. Pass that conversation ball. Really care about what other people are saying. Really be interested and involved in other people's lives. Don't be focused on yourself. So being a good friend, preparing them to be a good friend, trying to teach them that. Always working on that independence, diligence piece. There's a lot of, I feel like in this stage, there's so much that we're trying to sew into in regards to preparedness. Kind of doing a lot of natural consequences as far as, Jackson, if you didn't get your assignments done today, the independent work that you were supposed to be doing today, you haven't gotten those done, but you want to go play with your friend, that's not going to work because you were told to do it, and this has to be done. Just as if a boss is not going to accept, oh, I just didn't get it done. I just kind of jacked around today and didn't really get it done. Sorry. You know, you might have some consequences for that. So trying to teach him natural consequences and that sort of thing is what we're trying to do in this stage too. Just to have him think, just to help prepare him for the next stage.
That's good.
Yeah. Anything else you think in that regard?
That's great.
All right. What do you cherish most about this stage of parenting?
For me, the thing I cherish the most is how much, and again, we just have the one that's in this stage right now, but how much he wants to be like me. And that probably sounds conceited, and I don't mean it to be, but you know, here's a principle of parenting, and this is super important. We were told this years ago, and it's really impacted me. Sons look to their fathers for their identity. They look to their mothers for their security. Daughters look to their mothers for their identity, and they look to their fathers for their security. This 6 to 12 range is really where that becomes a reality, right? It's really where, and I even see it with Ryan in the 5-year-old range. She wants to be held by me, and she wants to sit and have long conversation with me, and it's that connection and that, okay, I just need to know you're here, right? Jackson shapes so much of his life mimicking the things that I'm doing. And so he's trying to come into his own on what am I going to be like as a man? And so much of that is falling in lockstep with what I display as a man, which sometimes is a good thing, a lot of times is not a good thing. And I have to have that conversation with him about, hey, both you and I should not be acting this way. Can we work on that together? But for me, that thing of fathers to sons identity, fathers to or sons to moms security, since Jackson's the only one that's been there, seeing that play out and how while he can take advantage of you and be unkind to you sometimes, he definitely takes that security from knowing you're here and you're always going to be here, and he loves it. And so seeing that play out is the thing I've really cherished the most. How about you?
I cherish that he really is a buddy, and that's not to say that we don't have a parent-child relationship, because we definitely do, but he's also a great buddy a lot of times, and some of that is because he is so much older than the other kids, but this stage is a great stage. You know, we're saying it's kind of the sweet spot where I enjoy doing a lot of things with him in that 0 to 5 range. Doing things with your children, for me at least, is more out, not so much out of enjoyment, but out of need and obligation and necessity. You know, I need to sow into my child, and it's a self-sacrificing spending time with them in a lot, not all the time, but in a lot of ways.
It's a labor of love.
Playing pretend is not really what I want to be doing. Sure. But this 6 to 12 range, they've grown mentally and emotionally and such that playing a board game with him, super fun. Playing Mario Kart with him, super fun. Going on a walk or bike ride or whatever, we have some really good what I would say buddy time.
Shoulder to shoulder time.
Shoulder to shoulder time, or having some conversations. You know, all that is so fun, and he hasn't hit those teenage years where I'm not cool anymore. I pray that doesn't have to be the way it is in teenage years either, but he hasn't hit those teenage years either, so it's really a fun buddy time, and I cherish those moments, which I know aren't going to last forever, where we're here, we're together a lot, and we get to have a lot of those buddy moments.
That's right. That's right.
I cherish that. Yeah.
Awesome, guys. So, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you had a few things to chew on to take away from this episode. If there are things you disagreed with or other comments you would like to hear or like us to address, please put them in the comments below or shoot us an email, marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. Next week, we're going to tackle what have traditionally been those most feared of years, the teenage years, 13 to 19, next week. So we do not have a 13 to 19-year-old. However, we have the distinct privilege of the head pastor of our church and his wife, Pastor Todd Doxson, and his wife, Denise Doxson. They've agreed to join us as guests on the podcast. They have raised two wonderful boys who have just graduated high school and will be going on to start their college years and adult life here shortly. So they are going to join us next week. Hope you will join us as well on Family Friday. Have a great weekend.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Marriage by Design. If you were impacted by this video, like it by hitting the thumbs up below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and once you subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes release.
Excellent. Also, one of the huge pillars of our show is interactivity between us and you. So we would love you to comment down in the comments below if you have thoughts about this video or if you have questions or other things you'd like to see considered in the future. In addition, if you'd like, you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram @marriagebydesignpodcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching Marriage by Design Podcast. Finally, if you want to, you can tweet at us. We do have a Twitter account that is @MarriageXDesign. Thanks, and have a great day.